Today I have 3 really clever tips for you, all about painting backgrounds with leaves in, loose abstract style backgrounds, and you can do these even if, like me, you're not naturally a loose painter. All you need to do is follow the steps. So for my first technique, I've drawn some quite precise leaves on my paper, but I'm going to have them bleed and run in places. I'm going to do this quite artificially by adding water in places and then painting them as if the water is almost not there. All will become clear in a moment. A couple of things to note: I would normally be working on stretch paper, especially for these techniques with lots of water. I'm only just taping my paper like this because it's a YouTube demonstration, so I would always do this on stretched paper. I've also drawn the pencil marks a lot heavier than I would do in real life, and that's so that you can see them on camera. Now, although you could experiment with doing this technique on a pre-painted and dried background, I prefer to do this particular technique on white paper, and the reason for that is when you put water on top of a painted area, it will leave a mark. So we're going to start by just taking some water across the picture like this, wide in some places, narrow in other places. I'm going to work in areas. In other words, I'm not going to put this water right the way across both sides, because by the time I've got around to painting those other bits on that side, it may have dried. Try not to be too regular with this. I know it's tricky, but don't apply it regularly. What you're going to do now is just paint the picture as if that water didn't exist. So we're going to go up here. I've got some darker paint here for the stems. Let's go up like this. And what you'll get is you'll get a combination of hard and soft edges. Let's paint some leaves. So where the paint hits dry paper, you're going to find that you get a hard edge. But where the paint hits wet paper, you're going to get some interesting bleeding. So I'm going to come up here. It may take a few attempts to sort of get the hang of this. It's possible to put too much or too little water on. And I'm going to do the same again, probably 2 more times until I get right over the other side. So here I've got some really interesting results, and you can see that as I paint on, once the paint hits those areas of water, it starts to spread off, and you get this almost this feeling that it's sort of a light or it's dispersing into air. It's a really interesting looking background. Make sure that when you apply the paint to the leaf areas, you're using the paint quite wet. That will encourage it to hit those damp areas of paper and to spread out. If you're working on a very large background, put the water on in sections so that one side doesn't dry out by the time you get round to it. If you find it hasn't worked, you can always go on with another layer. If you're enjoying this tips video so far, can I ask you quickly just to do me a favour and click that thumbs up, that like button, please. If you can like, share, subscribe or leave me a comment, it helps to push my channel out to more people. I can teach more people like you how to paint and draw, and I'm super grateful to all of you who watch me on YouTube. Let's get on with tip number 2. So this time, rather than working on white paper, I've pre-painted a background and I've allowed it to get completely dry. That's really important. Don't do this on damp paper. It needs to be bone dry. And you can see I've done quite a mottled background and kept the colours fairly light. I've just put some yellows and blues on the paper, allowed them to mix a little bit. If you have any trouble with this kind of wet background, I do have a video on it, and I also have some basic watercolour technique courses. You'll find all of the details for those in the description of this video. I'm going to use this masking tape. I've got some nice wide tape here. You can use any width tape, but if you have the wide tape like this, it gives you more opportunity to tear bigger shapes. This is too sticky. If I put it on my paper, it's going to tear the paper, so I'm going to stick it on my clothing and keep pressing it on my clothing until it picks up a lot of lint and the sticky is about 50% reduced. So I didn't film that bit because I think you probably have no interest in watching me press this on my skirt. And what we're going to do now is we're going to tear some shapes. This is great for long leaves, but you can do it for circular shaped leaves or any leaves at all, really. I'm going to tear these shapes here. It's important that you tear. Now, masking tape is not very good at keeping paint off the paper, so what that means is that some of the paint will go underneath the tape, and that's what we want because it's going to give a really, really cool effect. And so I think we'll just bring these shapes up like this, Sometimes when you cross over pieces as well, it'll encourage more paint to leak in. I'm going to get on and tear some more leaf shapes and place them on the paper. So you want to press your tape down firmly so that you can't see any little bits lifting up, but don't really press it so hard that you stick it too much to your paper. As I said, there is a danger that tape can tear paper, but if you've prepared it as I instructed you to, then you should be fine. All we're going to do now is put another layer of paint right the way across, and we're going to go with darker colours. Now, as I said, you don't have to do long shapes like this. This works for any shape of leaf. And I'm just going to go in. I've actually got several palettes here laying around. I've got an old one here with some ready-made greens in. Let's put some of those on to start with. Now, you need to go significantly darker. So let's get some dark colours in here. Not sure how dark any of these greens are actually. I think what we'll do is we'll add a little bit of ultramarine, and that's going to get us nice and dark. And I'm just taking a second layer right the way across, and again I'm varying the greens so that we get interesting shapes and colours forming. How neatly you want to do this, whether you want to leave back runs or do everything smooth, that entirely depends on the sort of painting that you're doing. You could, of course, always do this on white paper. Because you tend not to get white leaves, I find this particular technique works best on top of an underneath colour. I'm going to get on and take this paint right the way across. So now I'm going to allow this to dry. Now, normally I say to you, things must be absolutely bone dry. With this one, actually, you can get away with removing the tape when the paint is damp, but it needs to be damp, not wet. You don't want anything sort of running or moving, and you don't want that tape sort of dragging wet paint across. So it doesn't have to be 100% dry, but it should be mostly dry. So I'm going to leave it for a few minutes. So not completely dry, but dry enough to remove the tape now. What you want to do is pull the tape at a low angle. Don't pull it up away from the paper, because in that case what will happen is it's more likely to tear. So pull it at a low angle close to the paper like this, and pull it very slowly. And can you see how we've got this shape left, but the paint has bled under in places, giving us some really interesting textures. You can see how important it was to go dark enough with the second layer so that the first layer shows up. I'm going to remove all of this tape now. So there's my tape off. Really happy with those results. I hope you can see how interesting this technique will make your work look. So for background number 3, in order to start, I've done the same thing again. I've got a background of painted paper here that's bone dry, and you can see that I've gone fairly light with it, and I've got some mottled, mostly yellows, but a few blues in there. So we've just sort of mixed together and got this mottled background. I've got some masking fluid that I'm going to pour into here, and I've also got some leaves from the garden, and we're going to do sort of a printmaking technique actually. Now, you won't get exact shapes of these leaves, but they're going to look really good, and they certainly will be recognizable as leaves. So what we're going to do to start with is pour some of this masking fluid out. I've got a glue spreader here. I don't want to go anywhere near a paintbrush because it's really hard to get masking fluid out of paintbrushes, so you want to avoid doing that really. I've got some magazine paper, which works much better than newspaper because the print doesn't come off, and I've got my leaves here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put some masking fluid onto the leaves. You can, of course, just, if it's easier for you, just dip them in, but you can use the little spreader to get any bits that you miss or to take off any excess. And you have to be really quick with this. Masking fluid dries incredibly quickly. Once you have your leaf coated and you're happy with it, I've got the paper here so that we can, if we want to, we can spread like this. Spread all of that out, and then I'm simply going to turn it upside down, make an impression on the paper like so. Try to be firm with it, don't keep moving it around, and we're going to just push with some paper towel like this. Straight away push and then lift off. You have to lift off quickly, otherwise your leaf will stick to the paper, and that's a bit of a nuisance. So I've got some other shapes here just so that we can see how they look. So I'm just going to dip this one in a bit here, and let's spread it out a bit, and let's place that on, getting a clean part of this. Again, I'm going to press and lift. Now, you can use things like this. You will find that some of these little bits stick to the paper, but they should actually come off later on when you clean everything up and when we remove the masking fluid. So let's be brave and give it a go. Let's put this one up here. You might choose only to use one type of leaf when you were doing this technique. I'm just doing a few here so that you can see how they turn out. Not sure how well that one's come out. Let's try this little one here. Trial and error really. You'll get very messy like I am. If you have too much masking fluid on the leaf, you'll find that as you press it squidges out and you don't get any impression at all of the leaf itself left. But let's try this one. I'm just going to press and lift. If you want to, you can try again. Maybe I've got some marks on the back here. We could try put some on the back. I do find larger, more structured leaves like this tend to work best. Let's find a bit of space over here. And again, just going to press firmly. Press once and lift. What we're going to do now is to let this dry. So my masking fluid has dried now. It will still feel tacky. If you haven't used masking fluid before, you can expect it to still feel tacky. There will be a slight colour change as it dries. If you've got one of the coloured masking fluids like a blue or something like that, or a cream, you may find that it goes slightly darker as it dries. The white tends to go transparent as it dries, so this has gone transparent so I can see that it's dry. Don't paint on it before it's dry, because if you pick it up on your brush, you're going to ruin your brush. What we're going to do now is, just like in the previous example, we're going to put a layer of dark paint on top, and you'll start to see some of the shapes appearing. I mean, this is such a cool technique. It really does look like magic. You may find that you get an exact leaf shape. You can see a leaf shape. You may just see part of a leaf, or the shapes may look completely abstract, but they always look great. The only time this really goes very wrong is if you put so much masking fluid on, you get a huge blob. But we're going to remove the masking fluid, so worst case scenario, you could always paint over that area. So don't be too worried about this, don't be too precious about it. I'm going to continue now putting this dark paint right the way across that underneath layer. So you can see we've got some really interesting effects appearing. I like this bit down here. I like where you get sort of the shape of a leaf and then there are a few gaps in it. I need to let this get completely dry now, and then I'm going to use an eraser to, just with small circles, remove the masking fluid. You don't want to be pulling at the masking fluid or lifting it upwards, otherwise you can end up tearing your paper. So I'm taking my masking fluid off. I've almost done this large leaf here. Do be careful when applying masking fluid to a large area like this. Whether it comes off cleanly or whether it tears your paper can depend on a lot of things, including the quality of the paper and the brand of masking fluid. So don't put this on your best painting without trying it out first. I find you can just remove it with fingers like this, but I find that the easiest way to remove it is with a fairly firm eraser like this. Make sure that everything is completely dry before you remove it, and that includes the little bits of paint that are sat on top of the masking fluid. I'm going to remove the rest of this now. So here's my finished result. Really interesting. My favourites are the ones where you can see, like this one here, you get all these little veins and things, little gaps showing really nice effects. But do experiment with different types of leaf, and I think you'll enjoy using this effect in your own paintings. Thank you so much for joining me on this 3 essential tips video. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider subscribing to my channel. It's completely free and you'll get notified every time I have a new video for you if you click that bell icon. Before you leave this video, don't forget to pop into the video description. I've got all sorts of free downloadables for you there. There's even a free course you can take, and you can watch another one of my videos right now.